Welcome to the Month in Review briefing. I am meteorologist Dr. Stefan Beda, the Climate Program Manager here at the National Weather Service in Pendleton. This briefing will highlight the weather of January 2015. I will provide an overview of the January monthly statistics and will be followed by an overview of significant January weather events as well as the February 2015 temperature and precipitation outlooks. This graphic is from the High Plains Regional Climate Center and shows the departure from normal temperatures for the month of January 2015. The time period for the normals is 1981 to 2010. A value of 0 would mean that the location reported a normal average temperature for the month of January. Central Oregon, the John Day Highlands, the east slopes of the Cascades, and the Kittitas Valley reported temperatures 2 to 6 degrees above normal. The Lower Columbia Basin, the Wallowa Mountains, and the Oregon Blue Mountains reported temperatures that were near to slightly above normal for the month. Numerous records were also set due to the unseasonably warm temperatures that occurred in late January, which will be detailed later in this brief. The next graphic is also from the High Plains Regional Climate Center. This shows the percent of normal precipitation for the Northwest for the month of January 2015. A value of 100% means that the location reported their average monthly total precipitation. The entire forecast area reported below normal precipitation, with portions of Central Oregon reportedly receiving less than 25% of their monthly total. Of precipitation that fell, very little of it fell as snow. Information about our monthly snowpack can be found in our snowpack and water supply briefing. January 24th through the 27th was a period where an unusually strong ridge moved across the western United States. The low sun angle on the month of January, though, tended to result in low-level cold air drainage in the lower Columbia Basin, the Kittitas Valley, and the Yakima Valley that resulted in an inversion forming as well as low fog and stratus. However, wide swaths of central Oregon and those areas that broke out of the fog and stratus below 3,000 feet mean sea level recorded high temperatures that broke the all-time January record high temperature, with a few instances of this occurring on multiple occasions. Bend, Oregon set an all-time January record high of 71 degrees on January 25th, the first such occurrence of 70 degrees or higher ever recorded in the month of January. The previous record was 67 degrees on January 31st, 1971. Condon, Oregon set an all-time January record high of 71 degrees on January 27th, the first such occurrence of 70 degrees or higher ever recorded in the month of January. The previous record was 69 degrees, which had been set the previous day on January 26th, marking the second straight day a January all-time record high was set. Antelope, Oregon set an all-time January record high of 70 degrees on both January 26th and 27th, which marked the first and second such occurrence of 70 degrees or higher ever recorded in the month of January. The previous record was 67 degrees on January 25th of this year, marking 3 straight days of January all-time record highs being set. Redmond, Oregon set an all-time January record high of 69 degrees on January 25th, which beat the record that had just been set the prior day of 67 degrees on January 24th. Morrow, Oregon set an all-time January record high of 68 degrees on January 26th, which beat the previous record of 65 degrees set back on January 1st, 1918. Long Creek, Oregon set an all-time January record high of 67 degrees on January 26th, which beat the previous record of 62 degrees on January 2nd, 2012. Of note, Long Creek, Oregon would go on to tie the previous record high the next day with 62 degrees. Goldendale, Washington set an all-time January record high of 66 degrees on January 26th, which beat the previous record of 64 degrees set the previous day. Sadish Pass, Washington set an all-time January record high of 62 degrees on January 25th, which beat the previous record of 60 degrees set on January 31st, 1971. Of note, Sadish Pass, Washington would go on to set the second highest record January high the next day with 61 degrees. Surprisingly few record warm overnight low temperatures were recorded during the period of January 25th to the 27th. The main reason behind this is due to the much drier air that moved in over the region as the ridge of high pressure was moving across, which provided strong radiational cooling during the nighttime hours. Only a small handful of locations recorded their top 10 warmest overnight low temperatures for the month of January. Meacham, Oregon tied its fourth warmest January overnight low temperature with 41 degrees on January 26th. The current record is 47 degrees set on January 30th, 1971. Condon, Oregon tied its sixth warmest January overnight low temperature with 45 degrees on January 26th. The current record is 50 degrees set on January 30th, 1971. Bickleton, Washington tied its ninth warmest January overnight low temperature with 41 degrees on January 27th. The current record is 45 degrees set on January 19th, 2005. The main synoptic pattern for the month of January 2015 was characterized with the ridge axis that was over the Cascades. This helped keep the area dry by deflecting the main storm track well north of our area for the majority of the month. As shown on the figure on the right, anomalously high values, or values that are above the expected climatological norm, was centered over the Pacific Northwest. A few top 10 average January temperatures were set as a result of this unseasonable pattern. Numerous top 10 January average high temperatures were set across the region, with the greatest concentration of these records being set over Central Oregon. This was due in large part to the record-setting warmth that occurred in the latter end of the month. Keep in mind that these are average high temperatures, which is an average of all high temperatures recorded across the 31 days of the calendar month. Salish Pass, Washington set a new all-time January average high temperature record of 41.4 degrees, which beat the previous record of 40.9 degrees set in 1983. Bend, Oregon had its second warmest January average high temperature of 47.9 degrees, with the present record being 50.6 degrees set in 1934. Meacham, Oregon had its third warmest January average high temperature of 41.3 degrees, with the present record being 42.3 degrees set last year. Antelope, Oregon had its fourth warmest January average high temperature of 46.7 degrees, with the present record being 50.5 degrees set in 1934. Redmond, Oregon had its fifth warmest January average high temperature of 48.1 degrees, with the present record being 49.4 degrees set in 1953. Long Creek, Oregon tied its fifth warmest January average high temperature of 44.6 degrees, with the present record being 47.7 degrees set in 1986. Prineville, Oregon had its sixth warmest January average high temperature of 49.5 degrees, with the present record being 58.6 degrees set in 1902. Sisters, Oregon had its ninth warmest January average high temperature of 44.8 degrees, with the present record being 47.5 degrees in 1994. Hermiston, Oregon had its ninth warmest January average high temperature of 41.7 degrees, with the present record being 49.8 degrees in 2006. Bickleton, Washington had its ninth warmest January average high temperature of 39.7 degrees, with the present record being 45.7 degrees in 1994. John Day, Oregon had its 10th warmest January average high temperature of 45.9 degrees, with the present record being 49.5 degrees in 1954. A few top 10 warmest January average low temperature records were set throughout the area, but none broke any of the prior records set. Overnight low temperatures were not as warm as would be expected in Central Oregon due to the dry air in place along the higher elevations. This allowed significant radiational cooling to occur at those sites that had been setting record highs in late January. Keep in mind that these are average low temperatures, which is an average of all low temperatures recorded across the 31 days of the calendar month. Hermiston, Oregon recorded its fifth warmest January average low temperature of 30.5 degrees, with the present record being 34.9 degrees set in 2003. Prineville, Oregon had its fifth warmest January average low temperature 28.8 degrees, with the present record being 32.8 degrees set in 2010. Salish Pass, Washington recorded its fifth warmest January average low temperature 27.6 degrees, with the present record being 29.7 degrees set in 2010. Yakima, Washington recorded its seventh warmest January average low temperature 28.5 degrees, with the present record being 35.3 degrees in 1981. The Dalles, Oregon recorded its 10th warmest January average low temperature of 34 degrees, with the present record being 37.5 degrees in 2003. Pendleton, Washington recorded its 10th warmest January average low temperature of 28 degrees, with the present record being 31.2 degrees in 1934. Meacham, Oregon recorded its 10th warmest January average low temperature of 24.5 degrees, with the present record being 31.3 degrees in 1953. The combination of record high temperatures in some locations reporting warm overnight lows helped contribute to several January top 10 average temperature records being set. Sadish Pass, Washington tied its warmest January average temperature at 34.5 degrees, which was also set in 1983. Prineville, Oregon set its 4th warmest January average temperature of 39.2 degrees, with a current record of 41.1 degrees set in 1902. Meacham, Oregon set its 4th warmest January average temperature of 32.9 degrees, with a current record of 36.7 degrees set in 1953. Redmond, Oregon set its 6th warmest January average temperature at 37.5 degrees, with a current record of 41.4 degrees set in 1953. Hermiston, Oregon had its 6th warmest January average temperature at 36.1 degrees, with a current record of 41.3 degrees set in 2006. Bend, Oregon had its 7th warmest January average temperature at 37.4 degrees, with a current record of 40.9 degrees set in 1934. Long Creek, Oregon had its 8th warmest January average temperature at 34.6 degrees, with a current record of 38.4 degrees set in 1986. Due to the storm track being deviated well away from the Pacific Northwest for a majority of the month of January and the dry weather that the multiple ridges brought to the area, a few record lowest 10 precipitation totals were set throughout the region. John Day, Oregon recorded its 4th driest January total with 35 hundredths of an inch, with the current driest being 1/10 of an inch in 1961. Hermiston, Oregon recorded its 4th driest January precipitation total with 0.46 inches, with the current driest being a trace in 1999. Redmond, Oregon recorded its 9th driest January precipitation total with 0.28 inches, with the current driest January being 0.13 inches in 1984. Heppner, Oregon recorded its 10th driest January precipitation total with 0.47 inches, with the current driest January being 0.18 inches in 2013. In addition to the lackluster precipitation totals throughout the region, the unseasonably warm conditions also contributed to several lowest 10 snowfall totals being recorded. La Grande, Oregon recorded no snowfall this January, which has only previously occurred 3 times in 1988, 1994, and 2010. Meacham, Oregon recorded its 3rd lowest snowfall total of 2.5 inches, with the record being a trace of snow last year. Long Creek, Oregon recorded its 6th lowest snowfall total of half of an inch, with the record being no snowfall recorded in 2003. Pendleton, Washington tied its 8th lowest snowfall total with a trace of snow, with the record being no snowfall recorded in 2003.
We now turn our attention to the significant weather events of January 2015. I am meteorologist intern Michael Murphy. I am also the Assistant Climate Program Manager. First, I'll talk about the January 4th and 5th snow and ice event. A weak disturbance moved into the region, bringing a mixture of snow, sleet, and freezing rain to parts of northern Oregon and southern Washington. With cold air in place and 5,000-foot temperatures between 0 to minus 5 degrees Celsius, precipitation began as snow along the east slopes of the Washington Cascades and the Kittitas Valley region during the late morning hours on January 4th. The light snow continued here through the early evening hours before changing to a mixture of sleet and freezing rain. This mix then continued into the overnight hours before changing to rain prior to daybreak on January 5th. Up to a quarter inch of ice and several inches of snow accumulated along the east slopes of the Washington Cascades and the Kittitas Valley region. Up to an inch of snow and coatings of ice also fell in the Tri-Cities during this system, making it their second official accumulating snowfall of the season. Snow fell during the evening hours on January 4th in portions of Wallowa, Union, and Columbia counties. The snow again changed to rain before sunrise on January 5th, but not before 4 to 8 inches of snow accumulated near Elgin, Flora, and North Powder, Oregon, as well as near Ski Bluewood in southern Washington. Next up is the January 15th snow event. On January 15th, a stronger low pressure system moved into the Pacific Northwest and combined with marginally cold air banked up along against the Washington Cascades to produce snow. The snow developed and fell starting during the midday hours on January 15th in the Yakima Valley, Kittitas Valley, and east slopes of the Washington Cascades. The snow finally tapered off and ended during the pre-dawn hours of January 16th, but not before 1 to 4 inches of snow fell in the Yakima and Kittitas Valley regions. This system produced 2 to 5 inches of snow along the east slopes of the Washington Cascades, including a 5-inch report near Trout Lake, Washington. Finally, I will talk about the January 17th heavy rain event. Another system affected much of the region during the day on January 17th. This system had plenty of moisture to work with and thus brought a widespread, steady rainfall to the area. Rainfall totals ranged from 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch in many lower elevations and basins, including 0.92 inches at Prineville, 0.57 inches at Yakima, 0.42 inches at Pasco, and 0.35 inches at Pendleton. Rainfall totals of 3/4 of an inch to 2 inches were common across the higher elevations and mountains of the region. 2 top 10 daily rainfall reports for the month of January were also received from the storm. The Dalles, Oregon had 1.5 inches of rain, which is the third highest one-day January rainfall on record. The highest one-day January rainfall on record at the Dalles is 1.82 inches, which fell on January 1st, 2009. During the storm, Goldendale, Washington received 1.25 inches of rain, which ranks as the 7th highest one-day rain total in the month of January. The highest one-day January rainfall on record at Goldendale is 3.00 inches, which fell on January 5th, 1912. And now we turn our attention to the climate forecast for February 2015. This graphic is issued by the Climate Prediction Center, or CPC, and is a temperature outlook for the month of February. The cool colors indicate a greater chance of below normal temperatures, and the warm colors represent a greater chance of above normal temperatures. The period for the normals runs from 1981 to 2010. The Pacific Northwest is forecast to have a greater chance of above normal temperatures for the month of February. This graphic is CPC's precipitation outlook for the month of February. The green colors represent a greater chance of above normal precipitation, and the brown colors represent a greater chance of below normal precipitation. The region east of the Cascades has an equal chance of above, below, or near normal precipitation, though the Cascades may experience a greater chance of above normal precipitation. Please remember that these probabilities are averages, and the day-to-day weather will still vary for the month of February. This concludes our briefing. Please continue to visit the National Weather Service webpage for the latest weather information, including watches, warnings, and advisories. Thank you for your time.